Thank you so much for having me today, Tufts. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Jenny, for putting this all on. My name is Matt. I have a very strange accent, so there's no Google Translate for this. If you have questions or complaints afterwards, we can talk. Thank you for your time. We have about 45 minutes. I know everyone's got class and trying to get ahead in life, so we'll try and get through a very, very large... And Jim, you can hear me all right, eh? Cool. Jim's my guy back there. We're going to get through a very, very large, very, very difficult conversation today. As you can see from this title, Rangers, Rhinos, and Redemption, it's a very, very global issue, something that I hope more and more people in this room have been hearing about. To get started, I would like to kind of set the mood with a trailer for a movie called Rhino Man that we've been producing for the last 3 years. So I believe if I press this, it's going to start. Since the rhino poaching epidemic started, the amount of rhinos dying will be more than the amount of rhinos being born.
If you live for yourself, you live in vain. But if you live for others, whatever you have, it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to all of us. Our grandchildren should not blame us of what we should have done.
Being a Rhino Man is a very challenging thing. You don't have holidays, you don't have weekends, you don't have 8 hours, it's just you and nature.
You must have the guts in order to stand in front of the bullet. Because remember, there will be a poacher, there will be the rhino, and you are the bulletproof of the rhino.
If they are not educated, the nation is doomed. I must be held accountable in whatever happens within our society.
Until we can solve this war, until we can curb the insatiable demand from the Eastern markets, these men will be the last stand between survival and extinction. All right, that takes you straight to the front lines of South Africa. So that's Rhino Man. It's been a 3-year project that National Geographic picked up about 3 years ago with this trailer. And so we've entered into Sundance Film Festival, and we hope that it does well. But regardless, you'll be able to find it on something like a Netflix or an Amazon next year. But at the moment, what we're going to do now, we're going to go very, very deep into the root of rhino poaching and what it's all about. I do apologize, there is some graphic material in this, but it's the world we live in, and I think we all prefer the truth over covered up. So, let's first of all talk about the 2 types of poachers, the enemy, that we get on the front lines in South Africa. The first poacher is a subsistence poacher, right? So the individual that goes into a national park that poaches or kills for small amounts of food, just to provide for his or her family in a communal setting. In Africa, we've been using subsistence hunting or poaching for a very, very long time. The difference is now we have a fence, and that all of this wildlife is in areas isolated from communities, very, very poor communities that need to feed their families somehow. The other type of poacher we talk about today is the one we're all seeing in the news, right? The commercial poacher. The commercial poacher, it's large-scale, organized criminal activity that follows various stages of exchange for one purpose, profit. It's a highly lucrative business. So subsistence, here's a little bit about what it looks like. Individuals come into parks. This was in 2009 in Kruger National Park, and you can see on the top right, hopefully this laser, oh, that's definitely not the right one. I think I've destroyed the PowerPoint now, so blown it up. Nice, I'm super good with technology. Thank you. You can see here they put a little snare line. They flush animals, especially when it's around water areas, because animals in winter need water. And they'll put this female impala, like you can see here, she goes into a snare and suffocates. Individuals come back into the park and collect the meat and go back and sell it. You don't see this anymore in Kruger National Park, because anyone that steps in is more than likely going to come into contact with rangers who are now armed and out there looking for commercial poachers. Why do we have subsistence poaching? Just a bit of background on it. In South Africa, we now have the world's highest unemployment rate, above 30%. So poverty, desperation, and hunger. This was taken at one of the schools that we work with, and these children sometimes don't know where their next meal is coming from. Lack of governmental support and subsidizing. Our country is one of the most corrupt countries that you can find in the entire planet. Maybe you've heard of Jacob Zuma, who was recently forced to step down out of South Africa. He was a dictator of epic proportions. His wife is now under investigation for aiding and abetting in the smuggling of hundreds of pieces of rhino horn and ivory. So that's at the top of our government. So the money isn't going to the people, it's going to the wrong places. Overpopulation. I worked in community development for 2 years next to Kruger National Park, and I saw this huge explosion in young girls, 12 and 13 years old, having children. Why? If you live in a poor place, one of the few ways of getting money in South Africa is we have a child grant. So if you pop out a child, you get paid by the government to take care of that child. It's around $30 a month. And by the time you're 18, if you have 5 of your children, you've got an income of $150 a month. So people are having babies as a business to support themselves, and what do you get? You get a lot of hungry mouths to feed. The problem is the money does not go normally to these children. The children go and stay with the grandparents, and mom gets a cell phone. The same way we want to have a nice Ferrari parked in our garage, that's for us, that's our status. In Africa, we can't afford a fancy house or even a nice car, so the best thing we can have is a phone. And the more we use our phone and look like we're talking on the phone, the more money we have and the more socially acceptable we are. So imagine being in a society where you were born for a cell phone. Poor family planning programs. Yeah, people just don't really know. Our president, Jacob Zuma, told ex-president, thank goodness, said that if you have a shower after sex, you won't get AIDS. So that's fantastic. And customary ways and traditions. You know, in Africa, it's not uncommon in days gone by to have 10 or 12 children because we had things like malaria, we had wild animals, we had drought, famine. But today we've got access to a much safer community. But those traditions continue onwards. We've just got too many mouths to feed. Kruger National Park is South Africa's iconic national park. It's huge, the size of the Netherlands. On the western border of Kruger National Park, we have 2 million people and counting along that fence. So that's a very huge human-wildlife conflict under a pressure cooker right now. But moving away from sort of the background of the communities, we go over to commercial poaching. This is the reality. I could have put hundreds of pictures up of adult rhinos being butchered, but the adult rhinos isn't where they stop. They're going after these young ones now as well. This is what pure greed looks like. Pure greed. We'll look at the economics of how much rhino horn is perceived to have, to be worth on the black markets in the eastern economies, but this is the face of where we're headed as a globe. So I'm going to play you a small little piece from Rhino Man. Puts you on the front lines of what it looks like when you come across this.
So here's a scene that we see way too often these days. This rhino was poached 4 days ago. If you check how he's removed that horn, the suck knows what he's doing. One shot, animal's down, comes in, almost surgical remove. The suck was quick, and the suck's an opportunist, without question. This is exactly what we are training field rangers for, to prevent this kind of situation, to preempt that poaching situation that could happen. And that's exactly what we are busy with in terms of training the field rangers for.
All right, so you can see it's brutal, right? And we'll get into statistics, we can talk about that, but just to kind of put it more, every day, every 24 hours, on average, we lose 3 of these incredible animals in South Africa. Kind of brings it, so every 8 hours. Right, so why? Why rhino horn? What's the perceived value? So for thousands of years, rhino horn has been used in traditional Chinese medicine. They say it's a cure, elixir for many, many different ailments and disease. But this big one over here, around 2008, a leader in Vietnam put out a public press release that rhino horn cured his loved one of cancer. Now, who's had cancer or family or a loved one with cancer? Okay, yeah, mom and dad, for me, both of them have cancer, luckily they got through. But if there was something during that tough time that I believed would get them through to the other side and to keep my family around a bit longer, I would get it, for sure. I definitely would. The people over here, the consumers in the Eastern markets, they don't know the extent or the pain or the damage that rhino poaching is having, not just on the rhinos themselves, but the communities. But in 2008 is when we saw a huge spike in poaching in South Africa. Jambia handles in Yemen, when a young man enters into manhood, he's given a dagger with a rhino horn handle, sort of a rite of passage. That's been around for a while. The big one is cancer treatments for sure. Proposed aphrodisiac, that's getting a little bit more attention, right? But if you need a ground-up rhino horn to get the job done, then yeah, it's probably not much hope anyways for you. And then the last thing, this is the scary piece over here, because one proposed solution to rhino poaching is to poison the horn. And so that if you ingest it, it makes you sick and it doesn't taste nice and it's bad for you. But if you're using it as a status symbol, as in you go into a criminal syndicate's house and you find 4 rhino horns sitting on a mantelpiece, doesn't matter if you poison it or not. They use it as a status symbol again, the same way that we have a nice lake house. Look at me, you know? You can have a nice lake house, I'm just saying. You can show off to your mates and say, look at me, it's different. Because having rhino horn over here on your mantelpiece in front of all your friends, your cronies, shows that you've got huge political will and connections and you can get anything from anywhere for a price. So it's a huge, huge statement. Having a rhino horn as an ornament, yeah, things have definitely gone awry. This picture over here is with our star of Rhino Man, Sergeant Anton Mzimba. These 2 horns were seized and confiscated. I'll talk a bit more about Anton later on, but a rhino horn on average is 5 kilograms, and you're killing an animal that's 3,000 kilograms for that small thing. It just makes no sense. Talking about the money, so about $80,000 US, roughly. It fluctuates, of course, depending on the market, but around $80,000 US per kilo. If a rhino's got an average of 5 kilogram horn, that's, do the math, $400,000 US at the end of the market for one horn. That's a huge amount of money. In fact, the only thing worth more in this world is weapons-grade uranium and plutonium. Gram for gram, rhino horn is consistently higher than your range of diamonds on the market, rhino horn. So now you can see what you're competing against, what kind of money these criminal syndicates have. I threw these other ones up here too, just to compare. You know, on average, that's what the going rate of ivory is at the moment, about $3,000 for a kilogram. Plants, cycads, plants are being poached out of our national parks now. So it's not just iconic animals, it's the actual things that the wildlife needs to survive on the ground is actually being poached out there as well. And I'm sure everyone here, you know, we're at a vet school, we're at a animal-centric location. Everyone's heard about canned lion hunting. We have only 20,000 lions left in the world. And so as that price, goes up higher and higher to shoot a wild lion, people are breeding hundreds of lions in captivity in small enclosures, feeding them all sorts of growth hormones so their manes grow big, and then people from around the world will go and shoot a lion at a quarter of the price to have this up as a trophy. So our wildlife, it's not just the rhino. I think the rhino is an early warning detection system for where we are going as a planet, because if the rhino goes, then what goes next? A bit of spatial context to show you kind of where we're talking about today. The laser's the top one, right, Jenny? Okay. Right, it's not going to... There we go. So, Kruger National Park, this is where more than half of South Africa's rhinos exist, is in this area over here. And it shares a border with Mozambique, which is about 360 kilometers long. It's about 200 miles. The majority of poachers coming into Kruger National Park, they say around 90% are coming from Mozambique. And we used to have a big fence along Kruger and Mozambique side. That fence is very porous now. And they say at any given time we have between 10 and 15 poaching gangs inside of Kruger National Park. I'm not sure if I said it already, but just to kind of really bring it close to home, why South Africa? South Africa is home to 80% of the world's remaining rhino population. 80% exists in South Africa, and half of that exists in Kruger National Park. That's all right. Just to give you an idea of the last rhino, so you thought Africa was bad? You can look at the 3 other subspecies over here. not in a very pretty predicament right now. Poaching statistics, this is really interesting. We talked about, 2008, when that press release was issued in Vietnam about rhino horn curing you of cancer. Well, look how that spike has completely increased over the years. If you want to hear something really funny, you got to be funny when things are so dark. If you look over here, right, see how we're starting to have these numbers slowly drop down. Our Minister of Environment, Edna, I love her very much, she said, no, we're winning now because we're bringing poaching down. Does that look like winning to you? That does not look like winning. She said, no, but we're losing less rhinos every year. You are a genius. We're right. We're losing less rhinos because there are less rhinos to kill. So we are not winning. That is still more than 3 a day. So we are not winning. 2018 will only be released at the end of this year, but from what I've found out now, we're over 500. So we are still losing. Right. Just to really let this sink in, every 8 hours, so I guess in 16 hours, these animals would have disappeared from the screen. And some scientists say that when more rhinos are dying than being born, it's about a 5-year plus or minus period until all rhinos are gone. The population just cannot handle this anymore. And so 2026 is what some scientists are predicting at this rate of poaching when rhinos will be gone in the wild. And again, that's just rhinos, you know. We've got so many other animals, not just in Africa, but around the world that are hanging in this balance, that are victims of wildlife crime and trafficking. Genetic and reproductive concerns. Again, Sudan, that last male northern white rhino, he couldn't because the 2 females were related to him. So when you get below that minimum viable breeding population, you just can't bring it back. I did cheetah work in Namibia for 2 years, and we've got 7,000 cheetahs left in the world. When you get below a certain population size, the genetics get complete, as you know. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. The rhinos just cannot handle too much more until we really start to see the repercussions of inbreeding. And again, if you bring it close to home, extinction within our lifetime. Who's seen a rhino before? Who's seen a rhino in Africa before? Okay, so it's actually a good amount of folks. So for the folks that have seen it, can you imagine a world without them? And for the folks that haven't seen it, who's seen The Lion King? Right? Every single person, I hope. It's tremendous. This is part of our global heritage. This is who we are as society. And again, it's not just the rhino. We talk about rhino, we've got the film Rhino Man, but it's about so many more species than just the rhino. What is the rhino telling us? So tools of commercial poaching. How are these individuals able to get in and kill our rhinos? Well, helicopters. And I'll give you examples of all of these. We've had veterinarians in South Africa using helicopters to go in and take rhinos out. Veterinarians, guys that are there and ladies that are there, as you know, can you imagine? That's how money is corrupting people. The amount of money in this is too much for even professional people to turn away. Drones. When I was in Namibia in 2014, there was 6, I think they were from Japan, and they had a drone, and they had killed 17 rhinos with one drone in that operation. Just telling the poachers where to go with one drone. So you cannot fly drones in national parks anymore, thank goodness. Recruiting of ex-soldiers. So we said about 90% of poachers come from Mozambique into Kruger Park. Well, Mozambique had a 30-year civil war. You think those guys know a couple of things about bush law and tracking and how to evade people? It's these guys. In Kruger National Park, where we work, it's a 3-man team. Just 3 people that are part of this poaching gang. It's not 100 people, it's 3 people, all with very, very specific jobs. You've got one guy that tracks. He's in the front, okay? He's got an automatic rifle. That rifle is for rangers. You've got a guy behind him with a heavy caliber .458, 1 shot, 1 kill with a silencer, a 2-liter Coke bottle put on the back of a heavy caliber rifle. That's for the rhino. And then you've got the axeman and the guy that carries. And that's when the rhino goes down. He takes his machete, and just like you saw Ruben explain there, 1 swoop, and it's gone. So specialized teams, the stakes are too high. Heavy weaponry. The man that taught me how to fly, Bruce McDonald, was delivering planes and doing anti-poaching in Tanzania when he was shot at with an RPG. So no, we're not just talking about AK-47s, which you can get for $10 a dozen now. You're talking about some heavy weaponry and machinery, night vision goggles. This is who we are fighting. This is who our rangers are fighting. Inside intelligence of terrain and corruption. This was huge news. There was a regional ranger. So Kruger Park, the size of the Netherlands, is broken up into 4 regions. One of those regional rangers was found by his own men taking out rhinos. A regional ranger, a guy that's in charge of a quarter of Kruger National Park, was found on the inside taking out rhinos from his section. And laws in favor of the poacher. Just recently now, Mozambique's really started to crack down on the sentences they would give to poachers. But before that, poachers would come back, maybe the horns would get seized, and then they'd get let out. So the laws are not in favor of our rangers at all. And I'm not sure if we talk about it in the next slide. I will talk about it then, just to be safe. In South Africa, we don't have yet a shoot-to-kill policy. So our rangers go out, and unless they are fired upon, shot at first by the enemy, they can't engage. What kind of sense does that make? Even our government doesn't empower these rangers to take initiative. So our rangers are relatively powerless, even though they have their ways around it, I'm sure. So you can see the huge funding, huge support. How do we combat such a threat? There is light at the end of the tunnel. It's just, it's going to take a little bit of a drive. Possible solutions. These are just possible, that various organizations and professionals and scientists have put forward as possible solutions. One thing we must remember is there is no silver bullet that is going to save the rhinos or all the other animals. It's a combination of various strategies. I'll play devil's advocate though. It's always fun for each one of these things right here. Legalization. So rhino horn, the international trade of rhino horn was banned in 1977. And CITES came together in Johannesburg of 2016, and they said, all right, what does it look like to open up the international trade of rhino horn again? I had this business professor once. He said, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got, right? If we keep doing the same thing, we're going to lose the rhinos. So they came together and said, what if we legalize the trade, meaning we can control how many horns we are exporting to the consumers in these Asian markets. We can lower the price, so the cost to go and kill a rhino is much lower. It's not worth some people's lives, and we can control it. Geez, we can even breed rhinos like John Hume's doing in South Africa. John Hume owns 1,300 rhinos, and he is breeding them, hoping that the trade of international rhino horn will open up, because that'll make him one of the richest people in Africa. But is that right? We saw in Kenya when they banned ivory, right? It was banned, and they opened it up again, and poaching went off the charts. You've got a legal car market, right? I can go down the street here and buy a car, for sure, but there will always be an illegal car market. Same thing with rhino horn. They say, no, what we can do is we can take all the profit we make from selling rhino horn and put it back into anti-poaching, put it back with the rangers. No amount of rangers will stop ruthless poachers. That won't work. And again, I'm just trying to give you a little bit of both sides of the equation. It's very controversial. If we had this figured out, then I wouldn't be here today. I'd be on a beach somewhere. Dehorning. Every 4 years, a rhino horn grows back. Grows back about, I think it's 12 centimeters a year, if I got the conversion right. So it grows back relatively fast, but the cost that it takes to find, dart, and then take a rhino horn off is very expensive. You have to do that every 4 years. What poachers did, is they did this, a huge initiative, a huge campaign, and then they tried it. They went and told the community, hey, just so you know, we don't have horns here anymore. Poachers still came, because there's still a small amount of horn, kind of like in our nail beds, that you can remove. Plus, they shot those rhinos so they wouldn't have to track something that wasn't worth their time again. So I don't think dehorning is a viable option. Harsher laws. Yes, we talked about that. We need harsher laws. We need higher sentences. Still, some of the biggest poaching syndicates are getting out on bail, and their court cases get postponed, and magistrates get bought off. We need to have harsher laws, because without enforcing and backing up our rangers in a court of law, what's a ranger's job anyways? Government involvement. Time is running, but really quickly, we had the South African Defence Force a good few years ago step in to help our rangers, right? Our military come in and help us. Okay, I had a friend, section ranger, gets a phone call. There's an operation coming in, a poaching gang coming in from Mozambique that night on a full moon. Just by the way, whenever you see a full moon, pray for rhinos, because 3 days before a full moon and 3 days after a full moon is when most of our rhinos get poached. Why? Poachers can come in at night, undetected, and use the moon as a natural flashlight. So he got information, got informed, took his guys out to where they thought they'd be coming in from Mozambique, and sat there at night. And sometime in the night, there was contact, meaning there were shots fired against these poachers, and all of a sudden they started yelling, Yuma, 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 which means stop. And they realized, no, that was friendly fire. That was South African Defence Force right there, and Andrew's been shot in the stomach. And he was hospitalized for 6 months, and he's got 2 children. He made it through. But that's the thing. Again, no one's working together. Horn poisoning. Right, we can go and poison it, but again, if it's a status symbol, it doesn't matter if it's poison or not, so let's not even think about that. Shoot to kill policy. Alan and I talked about this morning. Yeah, sure, let's change the law so we can shoot poachers that come in. Botswana does that. They don't have a huge amount of poaching, but Botswana is different. In South Africa, if we shot every single poacher that came in, we would have a lot of dead people, but we also still have 2 million people along the South African side. That's discounting Mozambique. So we're going to be shooting a lot. And again, that's a symptom. I don't believe that taking human lives is the right answer to this. Community involvement and participation. I think that's for me at least what I've seen is where the answer really lies. As you know, in South Africa, we had apartheid, right? So the government took away a lot of land and put the local people on very, very desolate, let's say arid land, where it wasn't really worth too much. And so what's happened, we put up huge fences around these conservation areas. Us privileged Westerners, we go and then have safaris, and the locals are on the other side of that fence, and they don't get to see the national heritage. So when a poacher comes into their community and says, I'll give you $200, just tell me where the rhino is. Well, why would the community members do anything different? Wildlife's never helped them before. Wildlife doesn't do a damn thing for them. So why? That's what's happening. We have completely isolated and ostracized the communities that have been living with these animals for hundreds of years. That, for me at least, is the key. Demand reduction campaigns, and another amazing nonprofit called Wild Aid. They're huge. They're based out of San Francisco. They get celebrity endorsement, massive celebrities like David Beckham, Yao Ming, Jackie Chan, to get and do PSAs for the Asian market. Because apparently, I haven't been to Asia, but what I've learned and what I've heard from Wild Aid is that it's all about honor. And if someone like Jackie Chan or Yao Ming is up on a screen or on a billboard saying you bring great dishonor to your family by using rhino horn, well, that is one way they're starting to see some success over there. And the last thing, which is what I've come to talk to you about today, really is the rangers. Like, who are these people? So, rangers. Traditionally, rangers were ecologists. They were there to help the warden of the park manage things like game counts, what do we have? Looking for wildlife disease, managing roads, checking fences. But because of the rhino poaching crisis, our rangers have gone from ecologists to paramilitary soldiers. Some of them never got the right training, so it's just a whole new world for them. The challenge is a lot of our rangers are still making very, very low salaries for what they do. Harsh working conditions. So a ranger doesn't see his or her family for 30 to 40 days at a time. They make as little as $500 a month, which provides for not just his or her entire family, but community, extended family. Obviously, they're in a Big 5 area, so they've got dangerous animals, potentially dangerous animals around them. They've got malaria, they've got snakes, they've got spiders, and they've got poachers that will kill them for as little as their weapons and their boots. And they're making $500 a month in some cases. Legal complications, we talked about that already, but they can't fire unless fired upon. So our rangers are literally not empowered by our own people. Salary inequality, so this is a huge thing as well. Unfortunately, I've had friends that have turned to the other side, that have taken huge amounts of money, not to kill a rhino per se, but to give information away and to tell the poachers where to find rhinos. And that really hurt for me, as I had a really close friend that I thought I could trust that was going all the way. And it would seem that the syndicates got to him. And family. Now, when they got to him, I don't know if it was because the money was too high or because his family was at risk. They say most rangers get 1 of 2 phone calls in their lives. The first phone call goes like this. The phone rings, the ranger answers. It says, if you go left today on your patrol, when you come home, you'll find $10,000 in your mailbox. Just stay out of our way. Just stay out of our way. If the ranger is courageous enough to say, no, I'm sorry, I will not. I've got a job to do. I'm born for this. Puts the phone down. Okay, the ranger's out there. His phone rings again. Okay, this time, the voice on the other end says, your wife's doing the dishes, your son's playing soccer, your dog's barking. If you don't go left today, when you come home, you will not see your family. What would you do? I would go left. I would go left. So how do we empower our rangers? How do we empower the people that are the last line of defense for everything we hold dear to our hearts? This guy. Martin Mthembu. This guy changed my life. He was born into an apartheid South Africa in KwaZulu-Natal. He was raised in poverty, and obviously with apartheid, he was, what do they call it, 3/5 a citizen in South Africa. So he had not too many rights. His father died young, and as the oldest of his family, one of the few options he had to make money was to go and enlist in South Africa's 111th Battalion. So Martin went and fought for a country that didn't even believe in him. Martin took those skills when South Africa got its independence and applied it back into what he held dear to his heart, people and conservation. And they say in Martin's career, he trained over 15,000 rangers throughout Africa. He spoke 11 languages, and he touched many, many lives with his work. And unfortunately, in 2014, Martin left us. I owe him my life, actually 3 times. He saved my life twice from lions and once from a black mamba incident, which I will only tell you with a few whiskeys, because it's very nerve-wracking. But Martin's modus operandi is that poaching is not a wildlife issue, it's a people issue. What Martin was able to do was to communicate the value of wildlife to the people of Africa, that it belonged to them, that the continued existence of animals lied in their hands. And he trained people from communities. He brought them into conservation. He taught them the value of why we need wildlife. 1 out of every 22 jobs in South Africa is related to tourism. Without tourism, we fail. It's the only sustainable resource we have. And that's what Martin believed and promoted. I have a small clip here that honors Martin in our upcoming documentary. So I'll just play it really fast.
Martin Mthembu will, in my mind, forever be the best field ranger trainer that was ever in Africa.
And we worked together for 23 years. 10 of those at Ntanini, and then 13 of those in AFRTS, where we literally had our own business. And Martin, as a partner in the business, was vital. As a brother in arms, the most solid guy you could ever have worked with.
Martin impacted so many people so positively for conservation that his legend will stand in my mind until the day I die, but in the minds of the people that he trained, the people that he worked for in terms of the organizations that we've trained and things like that, forever.
I wanted to be Martin Mthembu, in fact, but I couldn't be. I looked up to him because from listening to his stories to the trainings that he's doing, I think for the youth to look up at a person of his caliber and want to be like him, I think it's very much important.
Martin, without question, one of the original Rhino men.
Yeah, talk about a legend. You don't meet many of these guys anymore. But that's Martin, and Martin was the one that inspired me to start up the Global Conservation Corps in 2015. After he passed, I thought, what's going to happen to the potential people that he would have touched? Now he's gone. So who's going to kind of carry on his legacy and his vision? So we started that to honor Martin's desire to involve local communities, especially with the youth. And therefore, that's where we started. So our mission statement, what do? We conserve wildlife through the upliftment, training, and development of people. Human beings, us, we are the problem, but we are also the only solution. And so we have 3 projects, 3 campaigns. Rhino Man, the movie, which you'll hopefully all be able to watch next year. We've been sponsoring a rhino orphanage for the last couple of years, and we've got the Future Rangers program. And I've got a couple little videos to show you. I think we're doing okay on time. Who's got to leave in the next 10 minutes? Anyone? All right, we'll be very fast. I'll just hyperdrive. So this is Tando.
Cuckoo and Impy. So Impy arrived first. He was 2 months old. He spent almost 6 days around the carcass of his mom. He was too small for them just to kill him and take his horns. So he arrived in April 2015. He was 5.5 months old, and his story is a bit sad. His mom was poached, and he spent 8 days trying to survive with another female and a calf. When he arrived, he was very, very traumatized, and it took 3.5 months approximately for him to settle here.
You know, we're spending all of this time with these rhinos and we're getting to know them as individuals and these personalities that really there's no one else who knows rhinos with these, like, on such a one-on-one basis. And then we are constantly hearing the stories of rhinos that are being poached, and you know, whenever I hear it, I just think that rhino is an individual, a personality like Storm, like Nandi, that are just being completely wiped out, and people don't understand like how incredible they are.
All right, so that's the Rhino Orphanage that we support. Amazing, amazing staff, amazing people. Has anyone heard of Tula before? Okay, well then I'll maybe skip that part. Right, and this leads me into kind of the final stretch. I know it's been a lot of doom and gloom. I hope the baby rhinos cheered you up a little bit. But it's not easy. It's never easy to talk about how we are losing a battle and how dire things are. Sergeant Anton Mzimba is a really good friend of mine. I've known him for almost 10 years now. I met him at the Wildlife College where I was working. And he's been a field ranger for 20 years. Anton, the first time he ever saw an elephant, he was 7 years old. And the elephant had been killed by a snare which got around its trunk. So in Shangaan tradition, they put the young kids on top of the elephant, and he said he remembered looking around at this elephant and thinking, how could such a big, beautiful animal die at the hands of man? And so he went on to become a field ranger and has committed his life to saving these amazing animals. During the filming of Rhino Man, he's our star of Rhino Man, I caught him one day in a very funky mood. I said, Anton, what's wrong? He said, I'm not good. I said, talk to him. He said, you know, I'm thinking about retiring soon. I'm thinking about retiring, but the guys that are coming in as new rangers, I'm not comfortable with. I said, tell me more. He said, my generation, Anton's 45, he said, my generation, we still had wildlife around us. We still had access. We could still see wildlife. He said, but the kids of today, all they want to do is become rappers, play their PlayStations. They don't get involved in wildlife. And so the problem is, as these kids step into becoming a field ranger, and someone approaches them and gives them a huge amount of money, they will take the money because their hearts are not in it, like Anton's was. And he said the kids of today, they just do not see wildlife. They don't see wildlife, and I'm very, very worried. Otherwise, what's all my work for? And so when Anton hangs up his boots, who will replace him? So that gave us the idea to form the Future Rangers program, which is all about getting children as young as 5 years old in South Africa, bordering conservation areas, involved on a meaningful trajectory into a conservation career. So every single week, We get these children in front of a facilitator talking about wildlife, the value. And at the end of every single semester, these children get rewarded. When they're 5 years old, they might get a small little picture or a wildlife poster to hang in their room, be very, very proud of it. But as they get older, it might translate into a game drive. It might translate to do a walk with the ranger. It might translate to do a 5-day leadership training course with us at our foundation. So that's our small way of getting the youth involved and ensuring that Anton's job as a ranger today is not in vain. Because the rangers are just buying us time. What do we do with that time? Clearly we have a lot of work, but our focus now is about the youth and getting the children of South Africa involved in protecting their national heritage. So I've got a short little video here. I wish I could have someone else in this video, but they only could have me. They only found me, so come on. Today, the vast majority of children in South Africa have never seen or experienced Africa's iconic wildlife. Therefore, GCC and Timbavati Private Nature Reserve have partnered up to form the Future Rangers program. We send children from local African communities into the neighboring reserve for 2 nights and 3 days. They go for game drives and walks, learn about the value of wildlife, and spend time with rangers learning about future careers in conservation. If you don't love something, you won't protect it. And that's why we are empowering South Africa's youth to take ownership of their national heritage and to become future custodians of Africa's iconic wildlife. Right. And that's kind of leads me to the last slide, so hopefully we've got a few more minutes before everyone has to go and get back to saving the world. Yeah, so to kind of bring it back around full circle, Tufts, right, where we are today, apparently outside of Boston, because I don't know where I am, just know I'm outside of Boston. Somewhere in the country. It's nice to be here. I'm better in the bush. But are we here at Tufts a poaching immune community, right? We might seem, or rhinos might seem like they're on the other side of the world, which of course they are, but as globalization increases and this type of poaching continues, we are all connected and we all have a part to play, because the same container ship that your rhino horn is in is the same container ship that people and weapons and drugs are in as well, which in one way, shape, or form or another affects all of our lives. We are all connected. This quote is probably the cheesiest quote. There's probably like 19 people with that on their lower back tattoos somewhere in here. Maybe. But it's true, and that's why it's one of the most popular quotes out there, is that if you want to do something, be the change you wish to see in the world. One of my other heroes is a guy called Damien Manda. He's an Australian ex-Special Forces operator. He came to Zimbabwe, and what he did, he found that the black rhino in Zimbabwe was under huge threat. So he just said, I'm going to save them. And what he's done, he secured a population of 500 black rhinos, and he's employed only local folks from the Zimbabwe area to protect their national heritage. It's about the local people investing in local wildlife, and that's what one human being has done. So if he can do it, and he's got a really bad accent. Mine's bad, but his is really bad. If he can make it through, like, we all can do something. Communicate in global trends. I really hope that you'll go out today and share what you've learned. That's the first step, is education. That's the first step, is being aware of the problem. If you don't know what the problem is, how can you make a change? Find your passion. You are all here, I believe, to make a difference and to do something valuable and empowering and worthwhile with your lives. We're all blessed with many different gifts and talents. I'm not saying let's jump on a plane and go fight poaching in South Africa or train up a bunch of school kids. I'm saying find your passion and what moves you and inspires you to be the best that you can be, because what I've recently learned, if you aren't strong in yourself, you're no good for anyone else. And that's where it's got to start. We've all got to be solid, contributing members of society in our own way. And it starts with one. I suppose the last piece I will leave us on here is with Martin's legacy. What did he teach me, and what's that message carrying forward? The last time I saw Martin, also the day he saved me from a black mamba, we were walking down a fence line, and he was really, really worried because he was recruited by the Tanzanian government to expose all the corruption inside Tanapa, Tanzanian National Parks. And you could tell he was worried, and I said, why do you do this? Why do you do this? He said, Matt, this is what's kind of kept me going. He said, evil is only allowed to prevail when good men and women step aside and do nothing. It's Edmund Burke. It's an amazing quote, but it's true. There is no middle ground here on poaching. There is no middle ground in something of this scale. You either are part of the solution or you're part of the problem, and sitting on the sidelines doesn't make a difference. So communicate, talk about it, share it, but be the absolute best that you can be in your own field, because I think if we all play our part, our own unique part in our society, we can make a huge difference and a huge contribution to ensure that not just rhinos survive, or elephants or lions, but we as a society survive in a community that we're proud of. So thank you all for your time today. It was a huge honor to be here, and if there are any questions, I hope I can answer them.
Okay, so we do have time for some questions.
How much of a part does the World Wildlife Fund play in any of this?
So the question was, how much does WWF play in huge? They're huge. The Wildlife College, where we train a lot of the rangers, that property belongs to WWF. So they're very, very much invested, but they also believe that the success, the continued existence of wildlife belongs in the hands of the community. So they're doing a lot more with community development. We're actually partnering with, it looks like we might be partnering with WWF to take Rhino Man, our documentary, to the communities so that we can make rangers famous instead of just guys that are helping the white guy keep his wildlife safe. Yes?
For the orphanage, I'm not sure how much of this you would know, but what's their rehabilitation or release protocol? How does that work for them? What's their success rate?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. So no one's heard of Tula Tula? All right, sorry guys, I was trying to end on a positive note here. Someone. Yeah, so sorry to I try to end on positivity, but this is the world we live in. So Tula Tula, we were there. 6 months later, that orphanage got attacked by poachers. Yeah. In the beginning of that video, it said, this is Gugu, this is Impi. Those 2 rhinos were killed. And that guy, Axel, was there. He was the only guy there at that time. There was other ladies there. They got assaulted. And so the remaining rhinos got relocated to a safer spot. Couple 100 kilometers away, and those 2 black rhinos you saw at the end there, Storm and Nandi, they have been successfully released. So they are back out in the wild, but it's a soft release, so they do get a lot of supplemental feeding along the way instead of a hard traditional release. I wish I could speak more to that, but yeah, it is a war. It's definitely a war out there. The fact that poaching gangs can come in and take out these young rhinos with that much horn, sometimes no horn, that shows the desperation and the greed of man. So, yeah. Yes?
So in terms of numbers of killed rhinos, how do you know? If I sneak in with my 2 buddies and we kill a rhino, we get the horn, and it's an area the size of the Netherlands, how do you count them?
Vultures.
Okay.
Vultures, unfortunately, are our best friends, but the problem is it's not just rhinos anymore. What the poachers do, they'll go in, they'll kill a rhino, poison the carcass, and so anything that eats that, lions, huge on the wildlife markets now, lion paws and vultures. They're killing as many vultures as they can because we as conservationists, we look for vultures to tell us where the carcasses are. If there's no vultures, the poachers get away a lot easier. So.
You said the government's changed recently, I'm not very familiar with that.
Yes.
How friendly is the new government to introducing laws to protect the rhinos, more stringent laws?
We're getting there. It's a process. We've got a businessman now who's our president, Cyril Ramaphosa. He's one of the wealthiest guys in South Africa, and he definitely sees the value of investing in wildlife and turning things around. But it's a process. Yes?
Really quick, is Tula Tula the refuge from the elephant whisperer?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then my question is, how would you recommend talking about this issue with people that don't know about it or
For sure.
don't care about it?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think from my side, I think sharing that trailer seems to be a pretty good job because it's fun. It's a minute and a half, but you get a pretty good idea of what's happening. You just have to bribe them with the beer, man, and say, hey, sit down with me, we're going to chat. You know? It's really hard to convince people why should they care, especially if they're on the other side of the world. Like, why? But it kind of comes back to the end, like we are all connected. And you might not care about rhinos, but everyone here has been affected by terrorism and what ivory and rhino horn fuel. So if you can bring it back to full circle, you've always got to ensure that it means something to people. Otherwise, they won't care for sure. So it's a good question. Yes?
So this is more of a personal question. I have been on 32 this entire time. So I'm wondering, how do you emotionally take care of yourself? Because we know, like, as veterinarians or as people in the animal world, we do have high rates of suicide.
Yeah.
So this is something that's very emotionally draining.
Yeah.
So how do you,
That's a really good question. That's a good question. I try to run. Yeah, I probably should try better though. Yeah, it's very emotionally charged, especially when an orphanage gets taken out or friends of yours, go out on the line of fire. Like it's hard, but it's people like Martin whose legacy keeps me going when things are tough. The fact that he wasn't even considered a citizen in his own country, but he still went out and did what was right. So yeah, but I could do better.
I'd like to know what kind of efforts are being made on behalf of the governments of some of these eastern markets to help campaign against the use of rhino horn for medical purposes?
Yeah, that's a huge question. So what are the governments doing in partnership with nonprofits to try and spread the message? Well, I believe if this number is correct, WildAid, who does all the demand reduction PSAs in the eastern markets, I believe the Chinese government donated $500 million of paid advertising time on TV, donated $500 million, so $500 million to get those PSAs out to the country, the community.
But legislatively, what are some of these pressures?
Yeah, so Hong Kong, yeah, this is not my world. I'm more with the people. It's too complex for me, hey? But I believe that Hong Kong has now, by 2020, will have a complete ban on ivory and rhino horn. But again, it's a process. It's just unfortunate we don't have that much time. But at least I think Hong Kong has been a huge consumer. I think China's been put now to follow suit. And Vietnam, I don't know where Vietnam stands, hey? I don't know where Vietnam stands. It is, and like that's a really good point. It's on multiple levels that we have to do it. Yeah, so maybe you should take that up with them. Yeah, so can you rephrase the question? Like, commercial farming, what do you think its effect on poaching? Yeah, that's a good question. So commercial farming, like farming rhinos, right? Would that be good? Would that be bad? That's what John Hume's doing right now in South Africa with 1,300 rhinos. His point is that no animal that was domesticated for economic profit has ever gone extinct. That's what he's saying. I'm on the fence. I go back and forth every couple of weeks with should we farm them and legalize it, but these places, if you've got a huge amount of rhinos, are sitting ducks. So as long as the world, these Asian markets, think there's that much value in them, they're going to be sitting ducks, which is really expensive. John Hume's about to go bankrupt. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Trophy. You would love it because it's all about farming. But to educate yourself, Trophy is incredible, and it talks about the two sides of the trade, pro-trade and anti-trade of rhino horn. And it's a fascinating watch that talks about it much better than I could. Trophy.
I had a question from online.
Is it my mom?
No, this is from Chelsea Blank, a former map student. So what do you think about programs like Campfire that redirect revenue from legal hunting to those communities you mentioned that are living in poverty right next to the wildlife reserve? Does the net benefit from building positive incentives for locals to care for wildlife really outweigh the losses of those animals when the populations are already so critically low?
Okay, well that is just a super easy question. Thanks, Chelsea, where you are. Yes, in a short answer, yes. So we're talking a bit now about Campfire. So they're involved communities, and what happens is a percentage of all hunting that takes place close to these campfire areas, a percentage goes back to the community, right? I'm not a hunter myself, but I believe if hunting is ethical and sustainable, it does have a piece or a place inside conservation. And I actually had it up here, but I didn't talk about it because it's a long topic. The problem is we had a black rhino hunt in Namibia in 2014, 2015 that went for $350,000 to sell that black rhino hunt. This black rhino was past his breeding prime. He couldn't contribute anymore to his population. So he couldn't breed anymore, and he was literally weeks away from falling over and dying. He was a huge bull. So my question is, would you rather have $350,000 when this rhino would have $350,000 to kill the rhino, or let him live out his life and 2 weeks later you've got no money? What would you rather have if half that money goes back to communities, to employing rangers, to building schools, to drilling wells? What would you rather have? It's not black and white anymore. We have to kind of work within this very, very gray scale. It's not a world of ideals anymore. Ideally, that rhino should live out its days in peace. But where else? How many tourists do we have to bring through to get $350,000? It's a lot of tourists, right? To get that kind of money from one hunt, one animal. So in a nutshell for Chelsea, and hopefully you're not like coming at me with a knife anytime soon because this answer, if it's sustainable and if it's ethical and if the community truly benefits, then I am for it. But sustainability is huge because you cannot be killing black rhinos if the population is 12 and that male or female is still reproductively capable. It has to be sustainable, it has to be ethical, and the community has to win. By the way, that black rhino hunt that happened in Namibia, I still have not seen any, I have not myself seen or heard about too many benefits that happened to the community. They sold it as this is a community hunt. This is for the, I haven't heard like, where did it actually go? That's where corruption comes in. So we need a lot more transparency, we need a lot more accountability in our governments and our communities. So that was a hell of a question, Chelsea. Yeah.
Also, just so you know, you've been invited to a tour of the wildlife clinic, but I think you have to catch a flight.
I can, yeah, that sounds nice. All right.
Any more questions? Maybe one more, sorry.
Yeah, of course.
Adding on to that one, but I've listened to a podcast before and talked about selling an older rhino because that like the older male rhinos will kill younger males and even females in any type of mate, and using that as a means of like selling a kill to go back into conservation. I have no idea. I mean, I just heard it on a podcast featuring the guy that hunted rhino. I'm wondering if you can comment on that and kind of clarify.
Yeah, possibly. Probably not with too much weight behind what I'm saying, but I think obviously you can see we don't have too many rhinos to deal with, and if you need to use an animal's like territorial behavior to justify a hunt, I don't know. For me, it doesn't quite resonate with me. I feel like we have that shouldn't be the question we're talking about. That shouldn't be the question at hand, you know? Like, there have been cases when they relocated 4 bull elephants, young bull elephants, to Pilanesberg National Park, and these elephants went around and destroyed a bunch of rhinos. They literally killed rhinos because they didn't have a bull to show them how to act. So that's like behavior where, sure, okay, maybe those rhinos, but it's not, I wouldn't use it to justify a hunt. We have too few rhinos to we need money, we need ethics, and we need sustainability to even talk about a rhino hunt. If it works, then yeah, let's make $350,000 and improve many people's lives so we can, uplift communities and stop poaching, illegal killing. But it's very rare to see that. Campfire, Chelsea was talking about, is one of the few places that does a great job. But they've been doing that. If rhinos have been doing that, which I've heard of, they've been doing that for 16 million years. I mean, that's just what they do. And how can you be sure that this young bull rhino will be killed by an older one? You can't be sure. Geez, like, they've got enough space right now. Rhinos have enough space. So, yeah, I'm not a... Good question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.